Hi everyone, welcome to On Visual Language. My name is Cyn Lagos and I will be your host for this show that I've created where we're going to discuss all techniques that have to do with visual language in the workflows of graphic design, photography, and film. I'm really excited because this today is our first show. And today we're going to be exploring Lightroom. So, photography first. So, if you're a photographer or you're delving into photography, the workflow we're going to be talking about today is one of the workflows I often use in Lightroom on the go or on my desktop. And recently, I went on a really cool trip to Park City, Utah, which was absolutely incredible. And I'm just now revisiting some of those memories via some really cool photos that I took on my Sony A7R III. So if you're here on the chat, say hello. If you're watching the restream, that's the restream fam. We all know you. I'm part of that quite often on restreams. So say hello, also leave a comment. And yeah, I'm so excited because this is brand new for me to be streaming here on the YouTube community. If you are familiar with my work, thank you so much for your support. If you aren't, you can check out a lot of the visual expressions that I like to share online, either through live streams on Behance or Adobe Live, or through Instagram, sharing my work and my ongoings with experimentations. So let's jump right into Lightroom. But first, let's say hello to my really cool on visual language title. I had a hard time coming up with this, to be honest, as we all do, because we are artists and we can't help ourselves but like dissect and try to get the perfect title, the perfect logo, the perfect everything. So I kind of went on a whim here because visual language is a very strong concept that has always followed my journey through all of this exploration of a visual design, visual language. I really firmly believe that visual language is a form of communication via either storytelling, or if you have strong convictions that you want to share. Not it Words aren't always it. Visuals can be a beautiful aid to translating a very important message. So I hope to be able to jump into that and more here on this shows. So say hello if you're here watching live. This is live, folks. This is one of my favorite things about live streaming. We get to chat along the way. So I'm going to be jumping into Lightroom today. And if you know about the Lightroom madness, Lightroom versus Lightroom Classic, Lightroom, those names, today I'm actually on the cloud-based Lightroom. So that means that all my files are stored in the cloud, and the interface is a little bit different, but very related to Lightroom Classic, which is this predecessor. And yeah, so I went to Utah, had an incredible time snowing and skiing for the first time in my life, which is it's a wild ride, let me tell you. It was freezing, it was so cold, but I totally love cold environments, and that was a really great time for me. I was invited by the Google team to meet other folks that were also creators and creatives. And so that, along with the space, the Park City, Utah environment among creators, it was just amazing. So I had undoubtedly an incredible time. This is one of my friends here posing along for me in the freezing cold. And you know, it was cold, right? So I wanted to share with you a few of these photos so we can start to peruse Lightroom as it stands. So I have a lot of my work here in different catalogs and different folders, and that's often how I go about it. Lightroom is different in that I can also use it on my iPad and on my phone. So during this trip, we were prompted to share everything we wanted and encouraged to share. So I often came in here and found myself actually editing on the go, which was very, very awesome and very helpful for me to be able to post for the brand that had invited me here, which in this case was Google. So let me see where this other images are. Cool. This is us with Olympic athlete Shannon Bark, and this was just such a cool time. These are some of the images I took on the Google Pixel while also editing on the go, which was, so you can see here, this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. So it actually looks like what I saw, which was white, blinding snow everywhere. It's honestly, you need glasses. Very, very important if you ever go to places like this filled with snow up and down. The light reflects everywhere, which is interesting to think about as a photographer because we're often want light everywhere. So yeah, I had a really beautiful time, and you can just see these incredible moments captured by the Google Pixel, captured by me with the Google Pixel 7 Pro. And look at these moments. I mean, come on. Absolutely beautiful. And if you followed me on IG, you probably got a chance to see some of these. And yeah, let me just have my timer here to make sure I know how long I'm with you folks. So yeah, I had a grand time, and this isn't just a story time. I'm going to jump into some editing, but I wanted to share this with y'all because it's one of those things that you find yourself quite often in, right? You take photos with your phone and you want to edit them on the go. So I jumped into Lightroom Mobile to be able to make these edits on my phone. And this was also very helpful because it essentially is editing a phone image, which tends to be a different format. And so that's going to be now a good series of references on color edits that I can now save as presets for future mobile images, which is something that I find valuable, right? So this image, we're going to get to edit here. You can see the before, and now you can see the after. Pretty cool, right? So I wanted to jump into some of these images here. And by the way, I'm just hitting the letter F to just go full frame and go back. Really cool moments here. And so I wanted to let you know also that, big surprise to me, you can also edit videos in here, which is wild that you can edit videos in Lightroom Mobile. So I find myself really intrigued by my workflow within Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic, but Lightroom Cloud-based, because I was able to access a lot of my files remotely and therefore use the mobile access and post in the moment. And so a lot of you folks that support me already on IG, on socials, probably got to see these first and got to see sort of the process and all these really beautiful moments that I was able to be a part of. So today I want to edit some of these Utah images. And now these images are a little bit different. They came from my Sony a7R III, and it was I have a filter on it that warms it up a little bit more, and it sort of softens the image. It's something that I really enjoy, so I tend to keep it on, even though it potentially reduces a little bit of the quality. I actually like that soft look I wouldn't say it reduces the quality, it reduces the sharpness of the megapixels that I have available in my Sony, which is like about 45, I believe. Um, yeah, so let me see. I'm kind of lost here in my folders, but I was just, let's find you here. The interesting part of getting um, getting used to your spaces. I just made this folder, so let's see. Oh, I called it Park City, Utah, right there. I was looking for Utah. All right. So I took a picture of this really cool Coca-Cola truck because I found it very, very nostalgic in that we all remember those Coca-Cola commercials where you had the bear and it's like, he's like, just drinking this Coke, and it's so quintessential, right? So it captured my eye when I first saw it. So I wanted to edit this, and you can already see that although I haven't edited this image, my filter already produced a nice color palette going on here. Look at the reds, look a bit more orange tinted, and the greens look a little bit more like lime and a bit almost like that old homage to film photography, which I just absolutely love. So of course you want to layer all that nostalgia on top. And when it comes to approaching image editing through a visual language lens, I love advocating storytelling. And I find this to be really interesting because it's the way that you can impact the viewer once they see the image. Now, some images can produce different results, but I often step back and ask myself, well, how did I'm just going to say this here. How did I find this image interesting? What were my feelings in that moment? What were my impressions? What made me take a step back and say, I'm going to hit the shutter right here in this scene, in this moment? So I've been really curious about how to translate that through image editing, through graphic design, through film, because I think that is the core element that really puts your fingerprint as an artist within the media that you're expressing. So in this case, we have here photography. And so, of course, within photography, it's really special to play with color as a medium or as a vehicle of symbolism. So we have here the red, we have the opposing color, we have this green, so a warm color to a cool color, right? But first off, let's kind of straighten this horizon here. And we have a few tools here to help us out. We have the crop tool that already involves a straightening. Okay, English is my second language, so you're going to get used to that eventually, my mispronunciations. And so I am going to use that tool to help me discern the right horizon here. Now, things like that, rules like that are worth breaking. I can choose to make this horizon a bit inclined so that it looks as if it's going upwards. And this is a cool play on just like the rules of the craft can be broken, right? I often think of elements like that. Like if I want to make something rule abiding, how would it look if it was breaking that same exact rule? So in this case, I actually like the horizon semi-straight there, something like this. Of course, I have to visit things like my optics to make sure that my lens or my camera aren't creating some strange chromatic aberrations or, creating some lens warping, which is very possible because I believe I had a 24-70 on this one. And so it often does do a bit of warping around here, around the edges. So I like to go in that order, cropping first, and then jump all the way to the bottom and reset my optics. So in this case, I can change my profile and find. So, well, I'm looking for my lens, which it happens to be a Canon actually, and with an adapter on it. I know. But lenses are expensive. And if you got it, just get yourself an adapter. And for the most part, it's done a pretty good job. I would say my only pet peeve is the focus on video formats. The focus on photography is fine. I found a lot of workarounds and it's just fine. So yeah, I really love this color palette. And so I'm curious, how much more can I improve this image? So I'm thinking I have a raw image going on, so I can pull a little bit of the shadows and lessen a little bit the highlights that are a little bit overblown up here, right? So one way I like to do that is I love jumping into my point curve. Now the point curve deals with your blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. Okay, so the most information is going to be found within your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. Anything that is black, anything that is white, is pretty much just that. There's no information in it. So unfortunately, we probably lost that information while we were taking the photo. We overexposed, we too underexposed. Actually, underexposing is usually a better bet. But yeah, this image is pretty fair, all things considered, just by looking at it and assessing it. I'm going to put 3 points here so I can start analyzing the shadows and start to pull up those shadows and see what result it gives me. Of course, if there is anything you can take away from an editing workflow on Lightroom or anywhere in the Adobe Creative Cloud, is subtlety is gold. Is absolutely gold. You want to be subtle with every move. However, push it to kind of sense, what can happen. But definitely your results are your editing is a matter of layering subtle moves at a time. So that's very helpful, at least for me. When I first approached it, it's pretty easy to kind of overdo it. And that's not what you want, right? So I'm going to do that. Now, one of the edits I love doing is I love approaching the point curve and all the different color channels. We have red, we have green, we have blue. And you can see here that it's reflected in the same fashion. We have a graph, and the graph is going to reflect from point A to point B until you add new anchor points, which I love adding the 3, right? Because they deal with highlights, midtones, shadows. And in this case, I'm going to create our very trusted S curve. And like I said before, we're going to layer subtle moves. So I'm going to bring down my shadows and bring up my highlights in each channel. And that's going to give it a particular look that looks slightly different from where we started, which is really interesting, right? So that's before, that's after. It creates more contrast, not only in highlights and not only in the light element of it, but also in the color element. So you can create contrast with both light and shadows, but also contrast with color opposition. So cool colors and warm colors. It's a good way to think about that, right? So now I can pull that blue, I can pull that blue a little bit more and start to see a different mood altogether. I can start to decide, well, the red, I want it to come through also. So maybe something like this. Now, as we move forward in our experimentation, a very important tool that I love using in Lightroom that is now like just vital to my process is creating versions. So versions is a result of, I think, a result of the Adobe Creative team understanding that in our workflow, we don't just create one edit, we often create several. So I'm going to create this version and call it contrast and color. And now I've created a version that is different from the first, right? And I can work from this and continue playing and experimenting. So I'm going to go here and I'm actually going to decrease some of this green and start to just play around with my edit. I can also use the target adjustment tool and go in here directly and start playing with the color options that are available to me, right? Pretty cool. And now I want to be able to create a new version and actually reset this. So by just double clicking, I'm going to reset all the points so that we are left at just the micro corrections we did on our optics. Okay. So now from here, we're going to do a different color edit to experiment. And this time I'm going to jump into the color grading. We're going to move on to a few other images with the color grading as a form of experimentation. So in the color grading, we also deal with 3 different tones. We deal with the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. Very cool, right? So it's all very similar. So I'm going to jump into the midtones here and start to add a little bit of color. And I'm also going to I love going into the shadows and adding a color into the shadows. It just changes the mood completely, right? This looks like solemn, and then this looks a little bit more warm and kind of like Christmassy. It starts to kind of just change the mood altogether. Of course, you can balance those colors within your shadows and your highlights. The higher you go, the more it affects the highlights. The lower you go, the shadows are affected instead. So you can start to see that balance shifting. And using the blending tool, you can also determine a bit of that balance too. So I love using the color grading. You can press this little eye, toggle this little eye to see the before and after, right? Pretty cool. I can go in here and now start to play with some of these colors and the color mixer tool. So I want to use the target adjustment just like we did in the curve tool. And I'm going to select directly into this red and actually modify that color. Look at that. It turns into a brand new branding of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola would probably be like, don't do it. We have a specific hex color for that, but we like experimenting in here, so we get to go wild and change it up. Oftentimes I like studying film, ISO films, to just sense the sort of things that show up in film that we can adapt later in our post editing. So oftentimes the reds tend to have a tint of green, so they get closer to being a bit orange, and that's pretty cool. The greens have that orange tint also, so I can also shift that a little bit. This color here is actually applying to everything because it's actually orange. So I like the way that image is looking already by just making those adjustments, that point curve, the color mixer, and the color grading tool. So now let's move on to another image. I'm going to show you this image here, the before and after, and I'm going to show you how we accomplish that. But before I do that, I just want to welcome a few folks that are now on the stream. Hi, my name is Cyn Lagos. Today we're editing some images from Park City, Utah on Adobe Lightroom. So thank you for following. Say hello on the chat and definitely watch this as a replay. This is a brand new show that I will be hosting here on YouTube. So I am catering to the YouTube community because I have just enjoyed my time here on YouTube as a voyeur. And I'm so happy to be able to be in a position to give back. So I'm going to teach you my tricks of the trade and everything I know, pretty much, because I really enjoy just sharing my workflow. I think this is really fun. So say hello in the chat and let's jump into this image and see how I went about it. And hopefully we'll learn a few tricks along the way. So let's see here. I have this image. So this is the before and this is the after. Before. Okay, so you can see before we have a pretty nice base. I think from a filmmaker's point of view, we often want our image to be super desaturated, right? We want those logs to kind of give us a flat look. And I've learned a lot from film in that respect, that maybe a flat look has a lot of potential so long as potentially your image has enough data to bring in. If not, you can always manipulate it, which, by the way, you can always find out in the information tab. It's so cool. It tells me exactly where I took this picture. Hello. In this amazing, I've been putting this into my images because I just think it's a cool little element. And yeah, it tells me also where with what I took it. So in this case, this was a trip hosted by Google, and I of course took it with the Google Pixel 7 Pro, which at the moment it's their latest phone, and it's been awesome to put it to a test. So this image here, the way I like to approach it, I'm going to go into my versions to be able to reset this image, but not before saving this snowy look as a version to go back to it if I need it. And I'm going to go in here into the original. You see, I just clicked the original. Now we're starting from scratch. And I'm going to approach this image with the things we just learned. For those of you who had been here with me from the get-go. So we've learned so far to approach our images with a bit of contrast, not just in light, but also in color. So we're going to step into light first. We're going to skip all of these basics in the light section actually and go straight to the pro. We're going to go into point curve where we're able to discern the different tones of our image. So we have the whites, we have the highlights, and we have our midtones, and we have our shadows. Cool. So I know that in here I see these incredible, beautiful Christmas tree that exists all year round in Park City, Utah. And oh my gosh, I mean, it was magical. It was absolutely magical. A little scary to be in these gondolas, but definitely these lifts. And regardless, it was just magical. So I want to pick up some of these shadows down here so that I can start to create contrast. Now, the reason why we're pursuing contrast, especially in mobile photography, is because contrast oftentimes can be perceived by the eye as higher quality because we perceive it as more depth, right? So we want more quality into our images from our phones that don't come from a DSLR camera that has lenses with glass that really emulate that sense of depth that we experience with our eyes. So our phone images tend to be a little bit flatter, and so we want to create that contrast. So we're going to create a little bit of that contrast by pulling in that shadow anchor point that we created here. Not the blacks, that's fully black. We're going to go into this section here. You can already see how much, take a look, pay attention to the trees here. You can already see how much detail it brings out. I hope that's able to translate over, but you can see how much it comes up. Now, I don't want to affect the other areas of my scene too much, so I'm probably going to go in here kind of slightly. Now, I do want to maybe showcase that much contrast. So there, my brain went to a workaround. So if I want to be able to apply that much shadows without affecting the lifts here, I can also go into an advanced section. I hope I'm not going to advance here. I hope this is a familiar space, or at the very least it inspires you, it intrigues you to dig deeper. But I'm going to go into the masking tools in Lightroom. And I'm just going to go in here, follow me. I assure you this won't be too difficult. It'll be easy to introduce into your workflows. So what I'm going to do here is go into my brush. Now, there's a couple things I can do here. I can actually select items with my brush, and it gives you a bit of a demo there of how it would work. Or I can choose to create a linear gradient, which essentially is a line that is selecting a certain area, right? We can do tonal ranges, right? So now we're dealing with tone again. So we can select all the shadows, we can select all the highlights, we can do that. I think in this case, I'm going to attempt to see if the Adobe Sensei can detect the background for me. This is a very complex image, so it's possible that it'll make some mistakes. So in this case, it did a fairly good job. You can see here the actual mask, right? You see the mask. And we can see that it's selected, for example, let's see. We can choose to invert this mask to only select the item it didn't select before. There's plenty of things we can do here. But you can see it only selected this lift. Lift number 55. Cool number. All right, play the lotto. Let me know how it goes. So I want to select a few more. So what I'm going to do is add to this mask. So I'm going to add to this mask really quick here. And I'm going to do that by selecting an object, brush. Okay, so I'm going to do that here and select a few of these items. And it's not that vital for me to select any of these, really. It's not going to be that bad because they are in the background, so I'll be fine with that. But I want to make sure something gets chosen in here. Got a little distracted there. Let's move forward with this selection so you can see what I was attempting to do without straying too far. So in this case, since we have this selected, we have the background selected. I'm going to remove these brushes. I don't think they're accurate enough. It requires a little more TLC. So since we have this brush selected, what I can do now is make an edit to all of the area that has pink on it, right? Pink, red, however it looks there. And that is going to be affected by my edit. So let's jump into the properties here. We have light as a property, we have color as a property. So I can actually bring down those shadows in the same way. We were affecting the shadows earlier, remember? So we're going to affect the shadows here to include more contrast. I'm going to affect the blacks. That's the area that only has perfect black, almost no information left in there but the color black. So we can use that to our advantage to bring out some of those trees. And you can see this is not being highly contrasted and affected in a way that it starts to look strange. in the way that it was happening earlier. Now we get to get that detail and that contrast in the background without worrying too much about affecting our main subject here, which I would say is that leading line of the lift. So cool, that's looking awesome. I'm liking that much better. I think I can go back now to my point curve and continue editing the rest of the image. And so now this is going to affect everything globally, any highlights globally. It's no longer within the mask. Cool. And so that already looks so different, right? Look at it, jumps out at you, right? Before and after. And let's jump into the color tool, color mixer tool that we learned earlier. And we're going to grab that target adjustment tool. If you don't know about the target adjustment tool, it's one of my favorite things. That's all I got to say. So we go into the target adjustment tool and you can literally pick anything from your screen and it'll detect what color palette that is. And we can modify that color to emulate a color that you're after. Maybe the brand wanted a certain color, like in the case of Coca-Cola, or maybe you're just trying to emulate some of those old nostalgic films of Park City, Utah. Have you seen those? Those are amazing. Those are really, really cool. I'll probably bring some inspo next time as we continue to do this film roll, this roll of images. And as I imagine, today won't be the last day. Today's just our first day. I think it's worth celebrating that. And so we're able to change that hue and you can see how that kind of starts to look. And I'm going to make it a little bit more orange. I think I'm going to actually affect the luminance. So that's just the highlight of that color. I'm going to affect the saturation. So that's the amount of color. And I'm going to affect the hue again, which is basically finding the color, actual color differentiation, the hue and the color wheel. And that already looks so much better. It's a really more of a standout image. One last step, I'm going to go into the color grading and jump into the shadows and add a little bit of color. Now, this is the part where you can be creative. It's not technical. It's rather a creative decision where you're adding a color. This color may not have existed in your image. You're choosing to add it either by a decision of creating that nostalgia, or you want to remind yourself of what it looked like in that moment because you took a second to remember your memories and try to translate it over to your images, or it's because you want to really accentuate the snow or things like that. There's a lot of decisions there that could be made based a lot of intuitive decisions, conscious decisions you can make along the way as you're creating your edits and post editing for your images. I think I have time to edit one more image here before I say goodbye or I say till next time. I think I'm going to edit this one here and show you a quick trick that I love using, especially when editing images of people. We have this really cool feature within Adobe Lightroom. If you're a premium user, you have access to presets. So we have presets here, which are really, really cool. And you get user presets, which are all the presets you create. And so, of course, I am a photographer. I find myself creating several presets along the way. Let me just... We have an insistent collar. Remember those days? It was like, we have a collar, and you log them in. That was pretty cool. Let me see. That's why I like my watch, because I get to say, sorry, gotta call you back. So, cool. Little interim there. But yeah, you get to see all of my different presets. Of course, a lot of these presets are specific to editing on your phone. are specific to editing on your camera. So I actually don't use these quite often on my phone. I will use an edit that is specific to the mobile files. So they tend to be a little bit lighter, but you can already see what a drastic difference this one makes. So this is one of my filters, and I can choose how much amount I apply to this image, right? So I can choose to do that, and I might keep that one there. Now let's jump into a different scene. I like that one, and I'm gonna go into this section where it says recommended premium. So I'm going to go into premium, and it gives me portrait filters for deep skin, medium skin, light skin. So I might go in here and start to find something that's suitable to my friend, my model in this case. It may be something like that. Or I can choose a more thematic edit, and so it has styles like futuristic, cinematic. Ooh. Some of these, of course, are going to land a little bit different on a mobile phone, and that's something to consider, which is why I appreciate that this amount feature is available here. That looks really cool. I think that's much. Subtlety is gold. Don't forget that. And that looks awesome. I like the way that looks. So that's available more for premium. And I'm going to leave you with a little gem that a lot of people don't know, but I think is worth discovering. So in the left-hand section, you're going to find this section called the Discover. And when you go in here, you're actually going to be entering a sort of social platform that is embedded within Adobe Lightroom. Wild, right? So in here specifically, though, it's catered for the photographers that are already using Lightroom, and it's for us to share our work. It's for us to share our workflow, our process. So I actually have a profile in here, and the reason why this is a special place for me is that I get to actually share the process of my edit as it exactly happened within my image. Isn't that really cool? Right? So you can see all of the decisions I made along with the resulting image plus a time lapse, which is really, really cool. You can watch the time lapse and the edits time lapse also. I think that's a great tool for anyone who's just starting their journey, who wants to just sort of learn from creators that they admire. Things like that are very helpful. So you can just see the way that they approach images and how they find their color styles or their color moods. And so the discover page is literally there for you to discover other people, other communities, other edits. You can also go in there and remix other folks' images, which is a really interesting approach, an inviting approach to see a different perspective on the photo that you've taken. A few folks have actually remixed some of my images, which is really neat. You can see this one here. This one is my edit, and this is someone remixed it, someone under the name Mermaid. Isn't that cool? So I get that option all within the Discover image. And so I share my images here all the time. Now, a really cool thing about this is that it also shows all of my different versions, all of the different remixes. Look at these. This one has gotten the most remixes. That's wild. Look how many remixes it's gotten. I'm so proud of that. Kevin Acosta did a really cool remix, and I get to see that translated into the image as it happens. That's a wild ride, right? It's what communities are built out of, right? There's no necessity to hold on to things if you can't share your creative and invite others to experience your creativity. So, with that thought, folks, I think I will be saying goodbye for today. Thank you for joining me, the folks that are on here live. This is a new series on visual language, hosted by me, Cyn Lagos, a graphic designer, photographer, and aspiring filmmaker here sharing some of my workflow. And I hope to see you next time. I will be sharing my schedule on socials. And hooray, we did it. We had our first on visual language. Thank you so much.